They're called the Greatest Generation, men and women from all walks of life who grew up in the Great Depression, led our nation to victory in World War II, and helped make America a beacon of freedom and democracy for all the world. And do they have some stories to tell? I'm pleased to be partnering with the New York State Military Museum and Veterans Research Center to preserve the words and memories of many of our World War II veterans. These stories will be entered into the state's archives, where they will be accessible to researchers, academics, and future generations. Our veterans have given so much to help build a brighter future for all Americans. This tribute is just one small way of saying thank you.
I was in the United States Army, and actually, do you want me to elongate a little bit on that? I mean, I was a staff sergeant and I led 12 men into battle, and my job number was 653. I still remember it.
Wow. And tell me, if you can, I know it's kind of a tough question, but do you have a lasting memory of your time overseas?
Oh, absolutely. I have a very long-lasting memory of the battles that I was in. I was in the greatest land battle that was ever fought, starting on December 16 of 1944 and lasting until January 25, 28 of 45. But I always have a little bit of a joke. I didn't go in until December 22, and I often ask the question, how did they get along without me? Because the battle started on December 16.
And what was that battle like for you?
All right, the battle lasted for 6 weeks, and we fought in knee-deep snow, and believe it or not, in temperatures below zero, starting in Belgium. We started in Belgium. We went through the Ardennes forest, and then from the Ardennes forest we went into a little piece of France, into Luxembourg, then into Germany, of course, beyond the Battle of the Bulge. I ended up on the Czechoslovakia-Austrian border, 10,000 miles away from home, and I'd like to tell the men who are listening to this tape, don't ever say you can't cry. I cried whenever I was alone because I missed my mom, my dad, my brothers, and my one sister. We were, in a sense, crybabies, and I'm willing to admit it. But when it came time to fight, we had the enthusiasm, we had the perseverance and the patience to outdo the juries. We call the Germans the juries. That's basically a little resume of that. I should leave my card before I leave. I'll get it out now so remember to leave it with you.
Okay.
Anything else? I could elongate a little bit more on that and tell you about some different experiences I had.
Absolutely.
You know, well, one experience I had, there were really two that I remember vividly. One was at Bastendorf in the central part of Germany, and after I came home I looked it up on the computer. 641 people lived in that community. And when you went into a street, or a city rather, you always had, like in my case, I'd have 6 men on one side, 6 men on the other side, and then as we moved on down, we naturally checked all of the apartments up and down, and I noticed this group of Germans having a meal. Now, for the past 2 weeks prior to that, we had beans of our ration and water. And I'm going to tell you, we were hungry. So I said to Private Haas, I don't know whether he's still alive, but he's from Buffalo, New York. I said, I naturally had to whisper, I said, Private Haas, go in there and tell them to throw the rifles back, and the staff sergeant is going to come on in. Well, I didn't know whether they knew I was a little man or not. But anyway, when I walked in, all the rifles went back, and I said to them, stand up on your feet and on the balls of your feet, or I'll blow your brains out. Of course, I had my rifle. So they went up. I didn't have them stay there too long. And I said, all right, at peace. And then I had one of my men march them out to the outskirts of town where we always had a linked fence back here where there was somebody there to take care of the prisoners. Then we went back And I'm telling you, I'll never forget that sumptuous meal. I even tell my wife, you got to make a meal like that. We had meat, we had potatoes, and we had, in my language, salada, salad, and we had some fruits and vegetables. And we had all of the food we can eat. And then I said to the men, look, there's a little bit of wine. I said, in my language, you could have a poquito of vino, which means a little glass of wine, but please do not drink too much because we still have another battle to go into. But I'll never forget Bastendorf. And the other city that always strikes me in this interview is Frankfurt. And let me tell you, that's not a hot dog. That's a city. And when we went into Frankfurt, we started on the west side of Frankfurt. We had to cross this bridge to the other side. And I noticed, before we tried to cross, I noticed a German on a bicycle. And he was going from right to left, and then left to right. And I noticed when he went from right to left, they threw a lot of bombs in at us. So I figured from left to right, I'm telling my men to go across the bridge. Now that goes to show you how intelligent the leaders of our army were. I just happened to be one of them. The company commander was wounded, and they asked me to take over the company. But as we went across the bridge, just before we got to the end of the bridge to get to the east part of Frankfurt, here was our captain. His name was Kubarek, K-U-B-A-R-E-K. I still remember his name, and he was dying. And you see, we're taught you cannot stop to express your condolences. But after the war, I've often thought about, and he was from Auburn. I never did go to Auburn. I'm still thinking about going there maybe and trying to look him up. Maybe somebody in his family is still alive, and I could communicate to them what a great leader he was, because he led us in the battle and he died for us. I often think, for example, I was telling the kids today when I was teaching them science, I work in a few of these wartime stories, because when you get into science, you get into these things that have to do, for example, with iodine and things like that. And in the songs that I sing, there is the word iodine. There's a little bit of mathematics, but anyway, I was telling the students today that in my opinion, they don't know how lucky they are, because in my opinion, I've been to H-E-L-L and back, and then I lean over and say, and I look them right in the eye, I go around, even walk up to some of them and say, do you know that you're living in heaven on earth? Of course, they smile. They don't believe that, naturally, at age 14 and 15. But anyway, those are the stories I try to tell. Anyway, when we got across the bridge, then of course we had to continue on, and we finally went all the way through Germany, through Berlin and so forth, and I ended up in a city by the name of Winterberg. Winterberg, I could never find it on the map, but it's right on the border of Czechoslovakia and Austria. And while I was with my men, I noticed this guy. He was going up and down this kind of a hilly territory. He was going up and down with this red roadster. I'm interested in automobiles, so geez, I had to get over and ask him. I said, well, gee, I said, that's a wonderful automobile. First of all, he said, oh, you are an American. He spoke perfect English. So I said to him, who are you? And he said, I am the mayor of Winterberg. And little did I know that later on in 1995, because this was back in 1945, that 20 years later, more than that, 50 years later, I was going to run for mayor and lose. But I said to him, well, how do you feel about the Americans defeating you? He said, Sergeant, you did the best for us because we had a monster by the name of Adolf Hitler. And because of you people, we destroyed him. See, if you study history, only 10% of the Nazis controlled 90% of the population in Germany. But 90% of the population were afraid to do anything. So they didn't rise up. It took the American army, the French army, the German army, even the Russian army. They even say some of the Chinamen worked with us to beat the Italians, the Germans, the Japanese, the enemy. And we were very successful. I am so proud of the fact that I was able to live through that greatest land battle as told by Winston Churchill. He's the one that said that the Battle of the Bulge is the greatest land battle that was ever fought. And every time I get a chance to, in my classes, I don't care what I'm teaching, I try to work that into my class. But I also try to work into my class a few of my songs. And if you'll grant me permission, I'll sing a couple of these songs.
Sure.
The first song has to do with donuts. These are Army songs. And I'll say to a student, the donuts that they give you, and I'll point to the student. They say are mighty fine. I'll go to another student. One fell off your head and killed a pal of mine. And then I'll say, oh, I don't want no more of Army life. And I grab my arms like this. Gee, ma'am, I want to go home. And then I say to the students, and some of them have done this, when you go home tonight, you go up to your mom, and I'll go up to one of the girls, and you look your mom right in the eye, and you ask her, Mom, did you have a nice day? And no matter what she says, you say to her, the little man, Mr. Canale, most of them know me. He said that I should love you, Mom. They put their arms around their mom, kiss them twice on the cheek. More and more of these mothers are getting back to me through other people to tell me they think that's a wonderful thing. I want, in lieu of what you hear in the newspaper and on television, I want our students to love one another, to love their teachers, even if they don't agree with a teacher. Look at what happened in Nevada and Massachusetts. That's terrible. And I also tell the students that if ever a terrorist comes in to our classroom, I'll take the shot for you. And this is where they get a little bit of a laugh out of me. I'll say, if I get to him fast enough, I'll deck him. And I'll never tell them how I do it. It's got to be a military secret. Within the Army, we learned this karate. And we were told never divulge a secret. Now this, I can tell a lot of secrets. And maybe I told a few, but that's one that I live by every day. I will not tell how I would do that. If you gave that away, that would be the end of any veteran taking care of a terrorist.